And now we come to the third story, which at first glance might appear to be the biggest, but allow me to explain it in a little detail. We come to Nadhim Zahawi, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, who has now prompted a growing story, culminating today in HMRC being under pressure to reveal whether or not he paid a penalty to the taxman after reportedly agreeing to hand over millions of pounds. So we've covered this story in some detail. We haven't heard back from Nadhim Zahawi's office with the answers to the questions that Dan Needle, the tax expert who started this ball rolling, shared with us on, I think, Tuesday of this week. We haven't heard back. How much have you paid? Why have you paid it? And how does this tally with your claim 6 months ago that your tax arrangements were 100% bang up to date? And when you consider that this potential bill goes back to a time before he was an MP, that question about how could you have claimed 6 months ago that your tax arrangements were bang up to date becomes ever more urgent. But if, of course, a financial penalty was incurred, then you have a question about malfeasance, not illegality. There's no suggestion of illegality, but of poor behaviour. So a former Chancellor of the Exchequer, the current chairman of the Conservative Party, denying that any investigation was underway, denying that there was any question marks hanging over his tax affairs, threatening to sue for libel, the tax expert who first started raising these questions, now, 6 months later, has reportedly paid millions of pounds to the HMRC, which a former head of the HMRC told us was perfectly feasible in terms of a sort of special fast track for public figures or big sums of money. The investigation or the conclusion would come around much quicker if you kind of did it yourself and said, look, here's all the money that you're likely to find I owe you. Take it now, that kind of thing. And he continues to refuse to answer any questions. And, of course, colleagues are put in the position of having to sort of seek to deflect inquiries coming from journalists who are minded to ask. Spokesman for Zahawi continues to decline to comment specifically on whether a penalty has been paid, which always throws up question marks, doesn't it? Have you paid a penalty on your income tax? No, I have not. Have you paid a penalty on your income tax? I'm not going to answer that question. It seems to me pretty close to a yes, but hey, what do I know? So here are three stories. Number one, Prime Minister, who's supposed to be a safe pair of hands, but already has one blotch on his criminal record from his period as Chancellor of the Exchequer, was filmed breaking the law in the back of a car. This comes fast upon, of course, attempts to castigate the leader of the opposition for being photographed by somebody trespassing when Keir Starmer wasn't breaking any laws, right? That's story number one. I just need you to rank them in order of what most gets up your nose and why. Story number two, an elderly Conservative politician, in an attempt to shore up his pretty gross depiction of nurses and other food bank users, essentially doxes his own junior female member of staff by revealing details of her employment and expenditure with a photograph of her in defence of the idea that anybody else might ever need to use a food bank. All right? And number three, a former Chancellor of the Exchequer has enormous question marks hanging over his personal tax affairs that he refuses to answer. 0345 6060 973. Three stories I want you to do in ascending order, the stories that most annoy you. It doesn't have to be, it's a slightly different question from what is most important, because in many ways these are issues of personality, issues of character. So off the top of my head, I would find it easier actually to defend Rishi Sunak on an issue of character than I would Lee Anderson. And yet you would think that breaking the law was objectively a much bigger deal than stupidly, boneheadedly publishing a picture of a junior member of staff. But where does that leave Nadhim Zahawi?